And hello, welcome back, everybody. Hope you're well. We're going to be continuing some of these amazing shows here. We've got a great list so far. I hope you guys have been catching up on the past shows we've been doing and continuing into this discussion about materialism, the fall of science, and the state of things, and specifically focusing on German idealism, which is something we've been covering for quite some time on Unslaved. But we've got some new notes to add today. So good to see you as always, Michael.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, David. That's right. A little bit of a mini series here, but valuable because it is where we are at. And I just feel that people should be abreast of, I mean, I'm not an idealist, but I'm fascinated with that particular subject matter. And now it's become current or will become more current. It's going to be somewhat, as the years go by, it's going to be a trending thing because there's going to be this, well, somebody could say it could be a clash between materialism and idealism, but although they're going to come together, there's going to be a collision rather than bouncing off each other, which has been the tradition for hundreds of years. There's going to be this cross pollination actually, and many of the materialists are going to give way to idealism. It's already happening very, very gradually. And the reason why that's going to happen is because the old guard of materialism are really dead and gone. There's a few left, hardcore, right? But they're the old guard that really started this, the Bertrand Russells, the H.G. Wells, the Isaiah Berlins, they're all gone. And so the newbies coming in, are more susceptible than we think. And when idealism hits them, there's going to be a few within that movement who start to question their philosophy on materialism and determinism and all of that. It's inevitable, and there'll be a cross pollination. There'll be some hard materialists who will stick it out to the end, and we all know that, that's inevitable. But what we've been pointing out in the last series is that materialism, regardless of what I just said, materialism is already shaken to the core because of quantum science, and that's not a fixed science. It's changed. It's it replaced the classical physics, and it'll change again. It'll morph. But basically, for the last 100 years now, it's shattered the core tenets of materialism. And so that materialism is already a little bit, punch drunk. Idealism, on the other hand, is quite strong. Although it too was thrown to the wayside. We'll cover that in a minute. But what we want to really look at today for members, because I've done so much on the premium, and also another one to watch is the Moral Universe. This is one in the premium. I think it's worth it. People will enjoy it if they sign up and watch that. It'll cover a lot of what we talk about today, especially when we get to Schelling. The Moral Universe will tidy up a lot of details for people. But in overview, again, just to sketch out some of the most extraordinary things, last week we pointed out that if mind, what we call mind, which is our avenue, our access to knowing everything, including the mind, that paradox is earth-shattering. It opened the modern world, whether we realize it or we don't. It wasn't Nietzschean as God is dead. No, it was Kant and the postulate that the mind occupies the noumenal world. There's this hard divide, according to Kant, but you can't think of the noumenon. It's off limits. We are focused on the phenomenal. Science, that's your raison d'etre. Religion, we invite you back to the table, but provisionally. We've clipped the wings of reason to make way for faith. So you guys are back, and I'm leaving it like that, said Kant, right? But I'm more looking to science. But what I broke it down was that, look, wait a minute, that means that then this phenomena, the student, the observer, is mind itself. And that occupies the phenomenal world. We even know that there's a phenomenal world and everything in it because of this thing called mind. But we are the holders of mind. The human being is the carrier of what we call mind. It's located in the subject. And then there's the mind itself. And according to Immanuel Kant, all things that the mind knows are representations, not the thing in itself. Well, then that goes for what we know about ourselves. We know ourselves as only representations and ideas, not as what it really is in itself to be human. And it's the same thing with the mind. Now, there's a lot of ways to look at that. You can despair and just say, this is a credible paradox. How come I was never taught this as a child? How come I committed to science and engineering and philosophy and psychology, and yet this thing was never pointed out to me? I see it as a kind of a cul-de-sac. I see it as a kind of cage. Please tell me there's a way out of that. Well, there isn't, because you'd have to step outside the mind, and that's impossible. Wherever you go, consciousness is with you. Everything you do, consciousness allows it. But consciousness, according to Kant, has these parameters, right, which lock you in to a particular, vision of the world, a particular kind of mentation. Then we said that means then that the only conclusion is the one that most idealists have made, and that everything is mental. If everything I know, including the mind itself, is by way of the mind, then we're mentalists. Then the mind must be seen as the universal first principle. But because it occupies the phenomenal world, it can be studied, right? We act as if. Remember, Kant said, hey, scientists, hey, thinkers, study the phenomenal world, right? So now comes in epistemology, where we study the mind. The mind is one of the objects of study, as long as we keep remembering the philosophical maxim that it is the mind that is doing the studying. And if that doesn't make people real, I don't know what does. So then what happened was, this affected the three men that we're going to talk about today, who were alive. Kant was, about to die. He was in his late 70s, 80s. And he sparked the rise of, he was German, and so he sparked, the rise of younger men who, shattered by what he was saying, either wanted to try and refute some of it, or mostly to expand upon it. Where he left off, where there was things that were inadequate. And those were, if you go to the first slide, those three men, of course, we've talked about them before, were Johann Fichte, Friedrich Schelling, and Georg Hegel, the three German idealists. And there are others in their circle, especially the monumental figure of Friedrich Hölderlin, Germany's greatest poet. And he was an idealist as well. Very, very important character. I think he shared rooms with Schelling, but was known to all of them. So they were all heeding what Kant, everybody in the world, everybody in Europe had read Kant in those days. That was the thing that was done, unlike today. So Fichte, as a young man, he decided that, this must be taken up. And if we go to the second slide of Fichte, you'll see one could speak so much about these characters, but basically Fichte is known as a subjective idealist. And he was the only one, as a young man, he questioned the noumenon. Kant's noumenon came under question for the first time, which really means that the hard divide between phenomenon and noumenon, the known and the unknowable. Fichte saw a flaw in Kant's reasoning. But before we get to that, basically what these three men, and what Fichte was the first to really grasp, is that it's all about the I. It's all about this consciousness, this mind that is located within the phenomenal world. And so that is the first principle. Self-consciousness, self-awareness, the I. He said that's the only thing you can reason. But then he embellished that in a most extraordinary way that shook the very core of the whole of European academic, society and the intelligentsia. Because he said, wait a minute, if Immanuel Kant has said categorically that cause and effect, one of these projections of our mind, one of these capacities of the mind, one of these categories of the understanding by which we see the phenomenal world, cause and effect is part of the phenomenal world, just like time and space are, in the other categories. People can look them up, Kant's 12 categories, right? But then he said that if cause and effect are attributes of the phenomenal world, then they simply cannot be attributes of the noumenal world, because there's a hard divide between these things, and what one has, the other doesn't have. So by locating cause and effect in the phenomenal world and not in the noumenal world, he's got a contradiction. Kant has contradicted himself, because then how can the noumenal world be the cause of the phenomenal world? And everybody just went, oh my God, we all missed it. It's a blatant contradiction. Who is this young man that noticed it? Cause is a matter for the phenomenal world, where you have one thing causing another. It's not even locatable. It's not an attribute of the noumenal world, according to Kant. Right. And that negates that the noumenal world exists. Because it couldn't, and even if it does exist, it's certainly not the cause of our world, and therefore it collapses as being important. Now, actually, Fichte and Kant knew each other. There was correspondence between the two, and they knew each other. But Kant died shortly after. So I'm not sure whether he had received Fichte's brilliant deconstruction here, right, and his criticism. But all this did, when the people stopped reeling from this amazing deduction, all it really meant is that then the phenomenal world is the most important of the two. The other one's cancelled as even existing. And suddenly, instead of a lining between the two worlds, that's blasted open like the cell of a wall, the wall of a cell. And now it is the phenomenal world extended to the horizon, right? In fact, there is no horizon. The phenomenal world now bleeds out to be the only world that there is. Right? This is very, very, very important, because it's the heart of German idealism. The critique of Kant by Fichte could not be itself refuted. And what it meant is, if you evaporate and dissipate the noumenal, all you've got is phenomenal. So our attention now is got to be, as Kant himself already said, only on the phenomenal world. But now this has got bells on. This is really amplified. And since we are the only conscious beings within the phenomenal world, then the being that we are, with the mind that we have, must be the central issue in phenomena. The central phenomenon, just by dint of what I've just said. And therefore, he is right then to position the ich, the id, the ego, at the center, the self. Self-consciousness now becomes the heart of German idealism, the heart of philosophy. Self-consciousness. Now, and this is just to keep this short, he starts teaching this first at Jena and then at other places, finally at Berlin for a while. Everyone is into it. Everybody's listening to this remarkable man. But as I said, some of his pupils, especially Friedrich Schlegel and Novalis, a great, great poet, they were members of the Romantic movement. They started it. And they had a huge following, right? And they're saying to Fichte, as we alluded before, okay, yeah, it makes perfectly logical sense. You're a logical man. You've positioned this phenomena called the I at the center of everything, and you've made it the first principle. But it's ungrounded, because where did it come from? From what does it arise? And Fichte said, it's self-positing. It doesn't arise from anywhere. And if you've got problems with that, that's too bad. And what I'm also saying is that now the noumenon is gone, it doesn't mean that there's no mystery. See, all three men, Schelling, Hegel, and Fichte, said that, remember, the mysterious, according to Kant, was the noumenal. That's why you bring theology back, and you bring, sort of a mysticism back, a kind of all the intimations of immortality. That was all assigned to you cognating or trying to cognate, you see, the noumenal. But the noumenal has now been blasted to the four winds. It no longer exists. Right, said Fichte. So therefore, the mystery hasn't evaporated, though. Just because I've got rid of the noumenon, I didn't get rid of mystery. Mystery is relocated to the phenomenal world. Mostly to the ich, to the I. All the mystery that Kant